Thank you, Dave, for those songs. I want to say a special word of thanks to uh, Dave Schallard and to Sarah for doing a lot of extra work this week to get our worship service ready. So thank you for all your work in service in that. Yeah, it was a busy, crazy week. But now we're here and everything is good. I want to start today with a poem. And so we've been talking about Christ-centered as a church, being Christ-centered, being led by the Spirit, and those two phrases have been sticking with me as far as where we're going, what we've been trying to do, the direction, the road that we're on. We're trying to have our identity as a church have something to do with being Christ-centered and being Spirit-led. So those are the phrases that I use, the phrases that I think about, I meditate on when I'm preparing the sermons, when I stand here before you, whoever else is preaching. I think those are, if you're going to describe where my mind and my heart is at in just 4 words, I think that's what all these sermons lately have been about. Let's be a church that's Christ-centered and a church that's Spirit-led. And we're going to continue to explore that as we explore our identity, and we've talked about it from various aspects, from centered on Christ, being led in the Spirit, our mission, our identity and participation within our immediate community, our neighborhood. All of that is so important. We're going to continue to walk down that path together. But if you have a poem here, this is Emily Dickinson, and Emily Dickinson is awesome. I made a commitment last year to start reading more poetry because I've always liked it, but I have not been in it for a while. And I totally failed on that. I never read a single poem last year. So, well, I did some, but I renewed that this year, and now I'm kind of fulfilling that a little bit. And I've been really enjoying a lot of Emily Dickinson's work. So I don't know if you can read that or not, but this she usually doesn't title her poems, but you'll hear what it's about when we read it together. She says, "I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth. Themself are one, we brethren are, he said. And so, as kinsmen met a night, we talked between the rooms until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names." Isn't that awesome and haunting and a cool image? Truth and beauty, they go together. They live together, and as Emily says here, seems to be, she's not too optimistic about the future of beauty and truth in our world. They die. And they go together, they die together, and eventually we can't even hear their voices anymore, and their names are covered up and their lips with moss over the grave. It's just a really haunting, powerful statement about beauty and truth in our world. And like I said, she's not very optimistic about it. But what she's doing here is describing actually a state of reality that we face in our world. She's recognizing something true about what's happening in our world. Yeah, beauty and truth don't have longevity. First of all, they go together. You can't have one without the other. But also, she's making an observation. Even, 100 plus years ago, there's something going on with beauty and with truth. And, if these, in people that die for these causes, but the metaphor of beauty and truth alone, that they don't have longevity in this world, that they die and eventually You can't even hear the echoes of their voice anymore, and eventually they're totally gone and forgotten. Even their names are covered up. So it's a powerful observation, a indictment of our culture and who we are as a people. And she's not the first to make comments like that, but I just think that's a really wonderful, powerful poem to get us thinking about the state of our world and to use a bit of poetry to do that. Thanks, PJ. One of my favorite authors for a long time is named N.T. Wright, and he's written in more than one place, most famously in a book by the same title, about this concept that he calls broken signposts. Broken signposts. And if you want to display that, I'm just going to show you the Amazon page if you ever want to buy this book. This is scrolled down to the bottom of the page, but that's what the book looks like, N.T. Wright. And N.T. Wright says that, and you don't even need a PowerPoint slide or a visual for this, because you know these words, these 7 words, because you're a human being. And all of us as humans have a drive, a need, a longing for these 7 words, these 7 concepts, these 7 ideas in our life. It's universal. This is what we are as humans. This is how we're made to be. And these words, these longings that are deep within us, one of them is truth, and one of them is beauty, just like Emily Dickinson was talking about. N.T. Wright adds a few more here. But here's what he says. This is universal for all of us. We have a need, a longing for justice in our lives, in our culture, in our society. We have a longing, a need for spirituality, for relationships, for beauty, for freedom, and for truth, and for power. And what he goes on to say is that despite our need, and this is what we're all looking for, this is what we build our societies on and our judicial systems on, this is what we're going for as humans. We want a society where we have freedom and truth and beauty and relationships, justice, spirituality, power. And let's do all that the right way. And he just takes each of those individually and demonstrates how we as humans fall short of achieving that, of realizing it, of experiencing it. Have you ever seen justice done right all the way, even for an extended period of time, or even for a moment? It doesn't happen with humans. There are some forms of justice. We could do a pretty good job sometimes, but no one is going to say, I'm real satisfied with the amount and level of, in the state of justice in our world. No one's going to say that. We don't get it right. We get it wrong. Same thing with spirituality, relationships. All of these, he says, are signposts that are broken. They're not ends in themselves. They're signposts that are meant to point to something else. And we can't even read the signposts very well anymore because they're broken. But they're intended to point to God, and more specifically, to Jesus. And now, I'm not a big fan of apologetics, as I've said before. N.T. Wright, there's a hint of apologetics in here, but N.T. Wright's really cool, and it's kind of apologetics light, so I don't mind it as much. But I don't think his point is purely apologetics. This is more about mission. It's about mission. This isn't a book that's like, oh, just so you know, you have all this stuff, so God must exist, or find all the answers in Jesus. It's also, the important part is, if we know this is true, then we know part of what our identity and our mission is about as the church. If we know there are broken signposts, if we know by our experience that these are the things that humans are longing for, and we know, as N.T. Wright says, that you can only find pure fulfillment exactly the way that it's intended to be known and experienced, pure, true freedom in Jesus, beauty in Jesus, justice, relationships in their purest form are found in Jesus, power. Nobody gets power, right? That's the hardest thing to do. We need it. We long for it. But it's so easy to for it to be corrupted. Jesus demonstrates the true way of power and possesses it himself. All these things. Jesus does it the right way. And when we are in Christ together, that's how we find the fulfillment of who we're created to be in his image. That's N.T. Wright's point. So when we understand this stuff, we're not just understanding, oh, this is a cool point about our makeup as human beings. We're actually coming to an understanding of what our mission as a church is about. Because this is what we found to be true. As Christians, we find that these broken signposts point to Jesus. And in him, we find fulfillment and satisfaction of all these innate longings. And if we believe that and have experienced it, then we know that ought to be our goal in this neighborhood that we live in, that God has placed us in. Now, that is great, but how do we do that? How do we know what we're supposed to be about? That's kind of been our question. And like I said, I don't have all the answers to that, and we're going to find those out together. But I don't want to just do a one-and-done sermon on this stuff. I want us to keep walking down this road. What in the world is God calling us to do and to be? How would we figure that out? One of the ways that we can figure out what we're supposed to be about in our worship service, in our ministries, in our mission, in our neighborhood, is to ask the question, how then has God gifted us? The lectionary texts this week, one of them is 1 Corinthians 12. Let's read that whole chapter again real quick. No, just kidding. Just kidding, I don't mean to scare you. That was a long reading today, huh? We won't read the whole thing again, but it's a familiar text. Hopefully it's still in your mind a little bit. What are spiritual gifts for? What does Paul say? Now, I mean, there's a 40-minute sermon here of going through 1 Corinthians and fleshing out the details of this. Is this thing charismatic or not? And asking all the questions. I think those are all really interesting to me. But I think when we dive into those details too much, we kind of lose the point of the text. And these questions that we miss the answers to because we like to focus on the minutia of these spiritual gifts, which, by the way, are not presented in an exhaustive list in this text. I don't think so. But what are spiritual gifts for? What's the point? Well, Paul bookends his whole text. Remember that huge long chapter that we read that took 20 minutes? Well, it was all really important. All of it was extremely important to who we are as a church and our mission. And the way that he bookends it in verse 7 and at the end in verses 24 and 25, he's telling us the point. So 1 Corinthians 12, verse 7, he says, "But to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for what?" For what? That's the question. For the common good, right? Look at that. Oh, nice move, PJ. For the common good. Whose common good? Is it just Dave Schaller and mine, just for our common good? Is it just for our congregation's common good? I think it's beyond that. Way beyond that. And as we think about spiritual gifts, we have to think of them in the sense of mission. Not just about in-house, what goes on here, spiritual gifts, like Paul talks about, someone's speaking in tongues in worship or whatever. Spiritual gifts are for the common good of everyone, not just the people in here, but the people around here as well. And as we search for and are finding along the way our identity as a church, we will find that via our spiritual gifts, how God has gifted us, how God has blessed us. And so they're for the common good. For the common good. They are missional. They are signposts, like N.T. Wright would say. The things that God blesses us with as a congregation are things that are meant to be used as the signposts that maybe address one of those 7 things and point people to Jesus. It's not about using our spiritual gifts. Your spiritual gift is probably not, knocking on someone's door and saying, by the way, this and that, just so you know, you should be spending 1 hour on Sundays sitting in the Church of Christ. Otherwise, it won't go well for you at the end. That's probably not a spiritual gift. But a spiritual gift can be helping someone to discover what they've been longing for. A person who only knows brokenness when it comes to relationships, even though as a human they long to have a relationship that is not broken. What if they can experience that in Christ? What if they can experience that in the church? In all other parts of their life, there's brokenness. Or someone longing for justice or truth or beauty. That's the mission. We know how to give those to people because God has gifted us with ways to do that. Or at least He's gifted us with ways to do that, and we can discover how to give that to other people. Okay, so the long text then. And then the bookend. What does Paul say at the end of all of this discussion about spiritual gifts? In verses 24 and 25. Verse 24, whereas more presentable members have no need of it. Okay, here it is. But God has so composed the body, giving more abundant honor to that member which lacked or feels inferior, so that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. Okay, so here it is, the other end of it. Another goal or point of spiritual gifts is unity, no division, unity, participation, care, family, one another. That's what spiritual gifts are for. So there's a common good missional aspect of it, and there's a unity internally that is the goal of spiritual gifts. God has composed the body with different people having different gifts so that there would be no division. And it's interesting that Paul is actually addressing maybe something that's going on in the Corinthian church, because it seems like spiritual gifts have created division in their church, have created disunity, because it became a contest. And some people were feeling or made to feel inferior, that their gift wasn't important in comparison with other gifts that were thought to be, not by Paul, but by these people, to be more prominent than others. And so some gifts are featured, some gifts are not. Some people are featured, some are not. And this is why Paul goes into this metaphor about the body. The church is the body, and a body is composed of many parts, and they're all important. When we make our baseball team each year, I don't draft 13 catchers that can't do anything else. It doesn't work out. You need all different gifts and talents and abilities to make a team work. And that's kind of what Paul is saying. This is his metaphor that he uses is a body. So sometimes there's a foot that looks at the hand and says, oh, man, I'm just a foot. Look at how awesome the hand is. And Paul says, all right, they're feeling that way, but that doesn't mean that they're not part of the body. That just means they feel that way. Either they feel inferior themselves or they've been made to feel that way by someone else. Same thing in ear. Oh, I wish I was an eye, but I'm not that awesome, so I guess I'm not part of the body. Paul says, no, that's not true. That's not true. God has placed, verse 18, the members, each of them, in the body, just as he desired. Verse 22, on the contrary, it is much truer that the members of the body, which seem to be weaker, are necessary. Seem to be. Paul's not saying some are this or that. He's saying this is how people are perceived and talking about others in the church. The body, members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. They're essential. The members of the body which we deem less honorable, on these we bestow more abundant honor. And the ones that are, quote, less presentable members become much more presentable. So he's talking about weak, unimpressive. He's talking about the dishonored, the unhonored, maybe even despised people in the congregation. And he's talking about what my translation says, the less presentable. That is a word for shameful or unpresentable, and it's also the word that's used for parts of your body that you'd like to remain private. That's what this word is when he says less presentable. Less presentable is the stuff we like to cover up when we're in public. Now, how does a church get to be like that? God has given them all these gifts, but then something happens where some gifts are being marginalized, not appreciated. People are feeling weaker, less honorable, less presentable. It happens when the focus is taken off of Christ and the Spirit, and the locus of that is moved to me, to the ego. And Paul's trying to help him through that process. I have an illustration that I wasn't sure if I should talk about it or not, but it's an illustration about the less presentable things in life. I think one of the most, I'll just tell it. It's fine. You guys can deal with it. It's really going to go downhill, though. We started this sermon with this beautiful poetry from Emily Dickinson, and it's going to end with me telling a story about being in the bathroom. So we're going to have to work through that, okay? So it was on Wednesday, and that was the day we were going to go pick up Tabitha at the airport later that night. And I was doing some laundry, and then I had to use the restroom. Now, the laundry is in this the mudroom, so there's no carpet in there. Laundry, mudroom, and then a little half bath with a pocket door, sliding door there in the mudroom. All right. So I was in a situation that was less than presentable, right? I'm in the bathroom, and so all of a sudden I hear the washing machine. I think to myself, man, that's really loud. It's like the cover is off the washing machine or something. Why is the water so loud? And I just noted it, and then fine. And then about 20 seconds later, under the door comes the flood waters right towards me, towards my feet. I'm in the most helpless and embarrassing and shameful situation. I didn't know what to do. And it was not the best time for me to be able to just stand up and run away, you know. So I just had to let the flood waters come over me. And I just cried out for someone to help me, my kids. And they ran down and like swam through the waters and turned off turn off the washing machine and got a bunch of towels. I was in a very shameful, humiliating, helpless, less than presentable state, okay? But my kids didn't care about that. They helped me. They gave me towels to clean up in the water in the bathroom. And then eventually, when I was ready to emerge, I came out and helped them. We got all the towels we could from the house. We're trying to clean up the water, which luckily was just kind of clean, mildly soapy water, so it was fine. And then we had to figure out what in the world happened. Why did our washing machine explode? And so we're gonna have to run a cycle and see what happens. So all the kids are there helping, and each one has a different contribution that they're making to the situation. Getting towels, coming up with ideas, holding the hose. Let's see what happens over here. Maybe it's the pump's working and the water's coming out, so it must be the drain. The drain backed up. So we get the snake and unclog the drain, and everything works again. But that was teamwork. And they didn't. They honored me in my state of embarrassment and humiliation and helplessness, and they came to my help. And I was part of the team, and they included me, and I included them in this mission that we were on. I think that's what Paul is talking about, something like that. But as we close, I want to ask the question, is there anyone in our congregation that experiences being looked upon as weaker or as less honorable or as less presentable? It may be that you feel that way on your own, maybe that you are viewing someone else in that way. This is your experience, or this is your judgment on someone else. But it's important that we admit these things to ourselves out loud. And being made to feel inferior or weaker or less honorable, less important to what we're doing here, I think basically that means there's not a place for your gifts to be used. It's frustrating. If we think that the only spiritual gifts in use in this church are speaking roles from a pulpit or a scripture reading or a prayer or singing, then we're really falling short of what God is trying to do here. If you have a gift that's being underutilized or underappreciated when it comes to worship, when it comes to our ministries, when it comes to our mission, then that means we're doing something wrong. If God has given you a gift, it's for use in this congregation, in this church. And like I said, that doesn't mean that you preach a sermon or lead songs or something. That's like one thing. There's a million things. What if you create something? What if you write a poem and you want to share it with the congregation? What if you love building stuff? What if you're like Don in the story he told the other week, and you just have something in your heart and you want to build something? Maybe it's some beautiful piece of art. Maybe it's a sign like Don was talking about with the big letters. And you just bless the church community with your creativity, with what you've made from your heart. I don't know, there's a million things. We all have stuff that we're interested in, that we're good at, that God gifts us with. And those need to be a part of the furniture and the fabric of who we are as the Holland Church of Christ. So I don't want anyone to feel inferior. No one should be sitting here this morning saying, well, there's those people and then there's me, the weaker, the less honorable, the less presentable. We're all important. We're all part of the body. Each of us has something different. So it's my prayer that we find those things, and with courage and boldness, come to one of the elders, come to me and say, I have this gift I want to use. And I've had an experience of being overlooked, and I just want you to know that. I pray you have the courage to do that. Or don't do that at all and just start using your gift. That's fine too. Last thing that Paul says, I got 2 more verses for you. It's in 1 Corinthians 13. He says, all the stuff that's been said doesn't matter one bit unless it's couched in love. Love is the main thing. Love is more important than all of these other spiritual gifts. And so I'll just read this, the last 2 verses of 1 Corinthians 13, and then we'll stand and sing. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I have also been fully known. But now faith, hope, and love, these 3 remain. But the greatest of these is love. Let's stand and sing.